Okay, hello everyone. Looks like we have most of, not everybody, that we invited online here. So first of all, I'd like to start out by thanking you folks for taking the time to participate in this. We know you're busy and that you have things to do, and we really appreciate you taking the time. Next thing I wanted to talk about is just a little bit of the ground rules for the meeting. Right now I don't have you folks muted, but as soon as I begin doing the presentation, I'll be muting all of you folks, and then when I get to a point where we want to discuss or field some questions, then I'll unmute your microphones. The other thing is the meeting is being recorded just for our own internal purposes. It's not going to be like published anywhere or anything like that. The other thing is we're going to have kind of limited time. We've got a lot to cover here, and I don't imagine that we're going to get, to have enough time to get into, detailed discussions about things. But the point I'd like to make is, we're kind of reaching out to you folks to see if there's anybody that is particularly interested in it and would be willing to follow on with us and give us, their feedback, offline, one-on-one, through email, phone, or further one-on-one GoToMeeting presentations. And so I guess the last point is this is something new that we're trying. I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, so if it doesn't go well, please go easy on me. Okay, so at this point I've got you guys muted. I'm just going to kind of touch on the purpose of the meeting. We're introducing two features that we think are going to have a pretty significant impact on your use of the product, and so we'd like to present them to you and then kind of gauge your reaction to them and see if you have any feedback or comments that can help us to further refine the concepts or enhance them. So there's the two features that we're going to be showing are our continued development of our knowledge-based machining library. You got a glimpse of that in 2015, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And the other thing is we're introducing a new hierarchical model view list, and it's basically a new way of presenting the data of your process model, and I'm pretty sure you'll find that interesting as well. So moving right along, I think the first thing I'm going to show here is the KBM library, and before I jump into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the different ways that people are currently using JOS and their JOF files and library capabilities that we have in the product today. So some of you may be familiar with the job library. It's basically a feature that allowed you to specify a JOF file to use as a library. So it's basically a jumbo JOF that kind of sits there next to your job and allows you to pull in step and tool information from that. The other capability that we have and have had for a long time is the material library. We kind of suspect that's a pretty heavily underutilized capability. It's very powerful, but we haven't seen a whole lot of people making use of it. And then the other two common things that people do are they have large JOF files. In one case, they're using a large JOF file that contains lots of steps and tools that they use commonly for a particular material. And when they go to start a new job, they load that file in, and the list view that shows the steps has all the steps that are in that file, and then they begin to use those steps to develop the toolpaths for their job. And then I believe some people probably purge those unused steps and store just the steps that they used with the process model. Others may leave them around so that if they have to do further work or edit the job, they can continue to use other steps that are in that jumbo JOF file. The other scenario is people that make family of parts often will have a JOF that represents a template, and so they'll load that template file right at the beginning and then just go on creating their toolpaths using the steps and tools that are in that template file. The last identified use case is, I believe it's probably pretty rare, and that's that people just create new steps and tools on the fly each time they create a job. And I believe the only case where I've kind of seen that, or what I think, where I think I've seen that is people that are doing mold or 3D surfacing work. They tend to only have, one or two tools that they're using to machine the part, and it doesn't really give me the impression that they have a large library of things that they're working with. So anyway, going back to that, I just wanted to touch on some of the shortcomings of those cases. In the case of the job library, any of you that have used it know that you can only access the library when you're in a edit context. So if you're editing a tool or editing a step, you have to go to the choose tool or choose step dialog, which then allows you to pick things from the library. When you're doing that, you have kind of limited capability to filter. I guess what I should do is I'll just go ahead and start up 15 so I can just show that real quick. So if you wanted to pull a step in from the library, the first thing you have to do is you have to add it, specifying the type of operation and tool, and then once you've done that, you've basically gone through the steps to create a new step at this point, and then you go to choose step and go to the library tab, and then it automatically filters based on the type, operation, and tool type selections that you made up front. And your only fallback if you don't find what you want here is to kind of turn off the filtering, and at that point you're looking at not only milling tools, you've got drills and all the tools. So there's kind of limited filtering capability. You can filter by diameter to kind of narrow down your selections, but it's a bit limited. The other limitation that we have with the job library is that the unique identifier for the items that are put in the job library is the step number and tool number itself. So in order to ensure that you don't have conflicts, you'd have to renumber your tools when if you put a new tool into the library, you have to kind of make sure that that tool number and step number is unique, and so it kind of is sort of a shell game at times to try and get things represented the way that you want. And then the other thing is there's no way to associate these with a particular material. So I suspect people have library files that they use for aluminum and for steel and whatever other types of materials they cut. So there's no easy way to have one library file that contains all the speeds and feeds for the various materials that you machine. Okay, so and then moving on, the material library, I guess some of you folks are familiar with that. So right now I've got a let me just see, I'll go up here and I'll set the material to aluminum, and then I'll add a step, and then once I've done that, I can use the calculate function, which goes out and looks up speeds and feeds from the material file. And like I said, this is a very powerful capability because you can really define how you want parameters to be looked up and which parameters you want returned. So it's not only just that you could return the speeds and feeds, you could return other things like your coolant setting or whatever you choose. The drawback there is that we don't ship populated databases. We kind of leave it on the user to use their experience to create the material files and speeds and feeds that they need based on their experience. So that, you know, does require a commitment and some upfront time to make use of that. And then I guess the other one that I wanted to talk about just was the jumbo JOF scenario. If I load in a JOF file that has lots of tools, you can see if I choose the step field here, I've got, you know, hundreds of steps to go through, and it's very difficult to figure out which one it is that I want to use. There's more information available by using the planner to make your selection, but even there's only limited abilities to sort. You can sort by type, and you can see that it's still not necessarily a sort, you know, putting them in ascending diameters or anything like that. So it's just not the easiest way to work, trying to use a subset of steps or tools from a large file. Okay, and then, you know, lastly, if you are the person that's creating things, you know, from scratch each time you use the product, clearly that's inefficient and not to mention error prone. Okay, so enough of version 15 here. So back to the KBM project. So our long-term goal for KBM is to create a foundation where we can capture all your manufacturing data and in the end have that support the ability to do feature-based automation. And, you know, that is a big undertaking, and there are a lot of pieces to that, and we're not going to be able to deliver that in one release time frame. So so that segues into our near-term goal is to deliver incremental pieces that contribute to that longer-term vision. In version 15, some of you might have seen that we had introduced the ability to store process parameters and retrieve them. So if there are certain features that you make, or, you know, if you make slots or pockets and you always use the same type of step over and pattern and depth of cut, rather than having to try to remember what it is that, you know, worked best for you, you can store those parameters using this menu here, and then you can go and retrieve previously used parameters, and it just sort of makes sure that you're not making mistakes and allows you to consistently apply processes to your work. The other piece that we added, which was sort of a little bit premature, but it did provide some capability even in the 15 time frame, and that was the ability to define a machine and add it to a list. So there's two purposes there. One was just a practical thing that, you know, if I choose this machine here, it automatically loads the SMF and CGT file for me. So it's kind of a time saver, particularly for people that are using our advanced turning product, where there's potentially 4 sets of files for, you know, the upper and lower turret for milling and turning tools. The other part of that was that we wanted to allow people to easily add materials that are later used to associate items that get put into the KBM database. I mean, there already is the material librarian that allowed you to do that, but if users are choosing not to use the material librarian speeds and feeds calculation capabilities, then it seemed a little bit awkward to just force them to go into that application to create those materials. So when you add a material here, it automatically creates a corresponding material file using a template file that we've provided. So basically, you know, whether you choose to make use of the material librarian speeds and feeds calculation capabilities, we've put the structure in place so that all you have to do is go back and edit that structure to get the speeds and feeds that are appropriate for the new material that you've added. But again, the other benefit is that it allows you to build a list of materials directly within the application that can be used to associate items that are being put into the KBM library. Okay, so then, okay, one other thing that I forgot to mention when I was going through the deficiencies of the existing approaches. In the case of the job library, one of the limitations is that, you know, like I had shown before, that when you go to add a tool or a step, you're adding a single item, and once you've added that new item, then you can select the item from the library. There was no way to essentially upfront build a list of tools or a list of steps that you want to create your process model from. So moving on to version 16, 2016, kind of our goal there was to replace the job library with the KBM library capabilities. So that, you know, the first part of that is being able to put tool and step information into the library and then be able to get it back out of the library. And at the same time, we wanted to overcome some of the limitations that I talked about with the job library. The first being that because we're using the KBM library is a relational database, it's using tables and relating items to other items. So it kind of provides a strong capability, and anything that you put into the KBM library is going to have a unique identifier. So for one, it eliminates that issue that we had with the job library of the tool number and step number being the unique identifier. The other thing that we wanted to address was to allow you to upfront go to the library and search for the tools or steps that you want to use to create your job. So, you know, myself thinking back to the days when I used to do programming, I would, you know, I'd look at the part print and I would look at the features that needed to be machined, and then I would think about the tools that fit the geometry and that I want to use to machine those features, and then I would kind of immediately build a tool list that I would use, and I wouldn't typically think too much about my speeds and feeds right up front, but you know, that was kind of the process that I would go through. And you know, like I said, with the previous job library capability, there was no way to kind of, you know, quickly build that list up. So with what we've done in 2016, we can do that. The other thing was to streamline the process. We wanted to make it easier for you when you're adding a single step or a tool to be able to quickly go straight away to the library and select something if it already exists there, and not have to wait until you get into the edit step or edit tool dialog before you can do that. The other piece is we wanted to allow things that you put into the library to be associated with machines and materials so that you could filter based on that. So you could say, okay, I want to look for a roughing process that uses a half-inch end mill and has been used on aluminum in a particular machine, and you can kind of narrow things down quickly to that, specific set of tools that might exist. And then the other part of that was, being able to sort those tools. So sometimes you'll look for a particular tool, and you might have 5 different tools that are of the same type and diameter, but they're all of varying length, and you'd like to be able to kind of sort things by length and easily find the shortest tool that you can use. So anyway, without any more discussion, I guess I'll just jump in and start showing you some of the 2016 enhancements. I've got a KBM database already set up, so I've got a few examples that I can show. Let me just start out by looking at some of those. Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, so before I continue on, let me just pause, and I'll turn off the muting on your mics in case you might have something you want to add or ask at this point.
This is Gary Markstreeser here, and I'm very, very excited. I think you're spot on. I think it's that's going to be a huge time saver. So that's great.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. And like I said, we're anxious to kind of get feedback and see whether there are other things that we can do to try to make it better meet your needs.
Mm-hmm. One thing, if I may jump in here, one is that's important is when we have a process, you should not underestimate that there's 2 or 3 tools could be daisy-chained, or sometimes 20 tools to one process if you do port machining, or like a center drill, a drill, and a tap. So it sure would be nice if you look for an M8 tapped hole, for instance, a 1/2-inch sertane, that you can pull in all associated steps and tools.
Okay, yeah, I think we have that covered, but you'll have to tell me when I show it to you. But
all right.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, again, I'm going to just mute you for a little bit here, and then we'll unmute again and see if you have any more questions or comments. Okay, so here you can see we're in, let me just back up here. So I'm in the planner, I'm on the step list, and we have a load steps button here. And because it's plural, it kind of implies that we're allowing you the option to pull in multiple things at one time. Right now I happen to have category and type filtering turned on. I can turn that off, and I can see everything that's in my database. And probably the first thing that's going to jump out at you here is, if you know our UI, you're going to notice that we have what we call a grid control that allows us to display data in a spreadsheet-like format, and that's something that we didn't have the capability to do previously, and we launched a project to incorporate that into the product. And not only this user interface component, but over time we'll probably see more and more of that kind of thing, making use of other controls that we haven't in the past. The benefit of that is, obviously we can do sorting by columns or by ID here, by description. So right off the bat, it gives you some pretty powerful capabilities that we just didn't have previously. And the other thing is I can select items, and I can do either shift-click range select, or I can do a control-click multi-select. I can select the items that I want, and I can put them into my selected list here, or I can deselect them. I can select all. I can do a Control A to select all and remove them. So it's a pretty comfortable, familiar sort of interface for working with tools and steps. Okay, so let me just go through some of these things. So with the category and type thing, if we have some behavior here that kind of remembers the last thing that you used. So if when I go to finish milling, it remembers the last thing I used was an end mill. If I go to face milling, it remembers the last thing I used was a face mill. Similarly, in hole making operations, if it's drilling and I choose a drilling operation, it knows that a hole tool was the last I used, a twist drill. Similarly for tapping. So just little things like that kind of make the interface a lot easier to use. Okay, let me just look at my notes here. Okay, so that's kind of the multiple use interface, so I can grab multiple items and bring them over, choose accept, and they're in my job here. So now going back to the load steps dialog here, there's also the ability to filter things based on material, and currently I have a aluminum material set, so if I turn on this part material, you can see immediately it reduces the list to just the items that I've associated with the current material, which happens to be aluminum. Similarly, we have the ability to filter based on machine. Before I do that, I guess I want to talk about groups, and I think that was getting at what Gary had asked. You'll notice that right now I'm not using a group, and the step number and tool number columns are empty, and it's basically just saying these are parameter definitions that are stored in the library. They're not, specific to any kind of setup or job file or anything like that. And so if I bring them across to this side of the list and I say accept, they get brought into the job and they're just assigned the next available step and tool numbers. If I had something like a template or I don't know, a tool list that I wanted to use for a setup in a machine, then those numbers might be important to me. And that's where we can define groups that allow me to put a series of steps or tools into a group. And in that context, the step number and tool numbers are unique. So, so you could simply, in the case of a user that might have been using the job library and had his tools and steps in that job library numbered in a meaningful way, when he imports them into the KBM library, he could define a group that represents that job library file that he previously used. And so let me just show that. If I go to step groups, you can see I have a couple of groups here called Quarter 20 tapped holes, but I also have one that's labeled as family of parts template. So if I click on that, you can see there are step numbers displayed and tool numbers displayed, and I can optionally make use of them. So if I turn on this and I throw them over the wall, you can see that all the tool numbers and step numbers have come along. Similarly, I have these tapped hole processes. I have two of them, and you might ask why I have two of them. In this case, I'm going to turn on the part material, and you can see that it immediately narrowed that one down to that's the process that I use for Quarter 20 tapped holes in aluminum. And again, I can just bring them over directly, or if I'm building a process model and I already have things in the job, I can just bring them over and let the job assign the next available tool numbers and step numbers. Let me just see. Okay, yeah, that's, I think that's pretty much everything here. Before I move on, let me just go back and set a machine. So here I've got some machines defined, and I'll choose this Haas, and I'll go to the tool list, and I can go to my tool groups and turn off material, and you can see I have a couple of groups there. If I turn on my machine filter, it filters it down to just the groups that pertain to that machine that I've related to this group. And again, because it might be a tool setup where I have certain tools and certain pockets of the machine, I can choose to bring over the tool numbers when I load them into my job. Okay, so that's the multiple loading capabilities. The other part is the adding, kind of adding on the fly if you want to just build your process or tool list by going through the add dialog. So let me just do a quick example of that. If I come to add, the default is new. So this is, while it's a different presentation than what you currently have with the release product where you have the op category, op type, and tool category and tool type lists, it's basically the same information. So if you choose to not use any of this new library capability, you would simply just choose your category and type and choose accept, and it takes you right back to what you're familiar with. On the other hand, if you do want to just pull things right in from the library, you can just go straight away to the choose tool or step option. And since you are all SmartCAM users, you understand a step is comprised of an operation and a tool. So when you're building this new step, you can choose to build it of using a tool that's already in your job or a tool that's in the library, or you could duplicate a step that's in the job, or you could choose to pull in a complete step from the library. So again, I can set a context, I can set my group to this, and I could choose to use that tool number if I want and just pull something directly in. So why don't I just go ahead and do that. And because I chose to use the tool number as it existed in the library, the system just assumes that you're pulling it in. There's no need to edit it. So it just went straight into the list here. So now if I add another one, maybe I want something that's finishing, and this time maybe I don't want to use the number that's there. I can just select that step, and it gives me the opportunity to change the numbers before I accept it here. So again, in current product, if let's say I wanted to create another step and use that tool number 3, in current product, I'd have to go all the way to I basically have to go all the way until I was to this dialog and then go to choose tool and select it there. But with this new interface, I can say right away, I just want to create a new step and I want to use one of these existing tools with their tool number. And you can see it just creates a new step, and I'm using a new tool, the existing tool at this point. Okay, so that's kind of a quick run through. You know, like I said, there's kind of limited time to go into a lot of detail here. Before I open it up for questions, I just quickly wanted to show how you get the data into the library. We're currently working on a data management utility, so there's only limited abilities to influence what's already been imported into the database, but We plan to allow you to browse the items that are in the library to see the relationships between the items, rename items, delete items, replace items with other items. So there's all that management aspect to this that has to be provided in order to allow you to really get a database that you're going to be happy with and that you can use. Currently, we have just sort of some stuff stubbed out here. Kind of ignore the fact that this is called import, and for the moment, it's basically we're going to have a separate utility that's going to be the database management application, and these import functions would be launched from that. So again, as a new user that's starting out with version 2016, first thing you're probably going to want to do is to try to figure out how to get some data into the library and start using it. So I'm just going to load a model here. So if this was something that you had where you had a set of steps and tools that you wanted to get into the library, you could go to the import steps function, and as you can see, it has a list of your steps that are in your current job. And again, you can use the single or range or select all behaviors to get the items that you want, and just put them all over into your selected list. And then at this point, you can define those associations. So just to back up a little bit, to really make proper use of this KBM database, you're going to have to put some thought and effort into what your shop does and what things you want to be able to represent. So it'd be ideal to come up with the list of materials that you want to be able to associate to, and create your lists up front with the job information material tab, and the same with the machines, so that you have a predefined list of things, and then you can select the material that you want to relate something to, and if it's been used by a particular machine, you can make that relationship. And then lastly, you can optionally save it as a group. If you save it as a group, when you turn on that and you give it a name, you can see that it's telling you that the tool numbers and step numbers are going to be saved with that group. If you don't use a group, then you're storing the parameter definitions, but you're losing the context of their step and tool numbers. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn back on your mics and open it up for any questions or discussion. Did everybody follow me there, or?
Yeah, Gary Markstreeter here. I think this is really, really impressive. This is really is going to be good. I have one question. Is there any provisions for tool identification numbers? That is a big deal for us, where each tool has a unique number, and that's carried to purchasing, tool crib, and whatever else.
Right. At this point, we haven't added anything new for that area. I guess you have available to you the user description, which is one place where you could potentially do that. But that is definitely a valid point and something we could consider. So you're basically just suggesting that there be a user ID field of some sort.
Right, because what is happening is what you're doing is really, really good, but in the case of aluminum, we probably use 6 different half-inch aluminum end mills, and if you even have a group and tie it to aluminum, you would not know which one to choose. Mm-hmm. And right now we're using every fields in this window that you got open. We use it for different purposes, like we description for a brief step description and so on and so forth. So we really don't have a unique identifier number for a tool. And I think that helps shops. If you have a couple hundred tools on one job you got to manage, that gives the tool room or the person on the machine specifically what number of tool to use, then we can tie that into suppliers and so on and so forth. I think it will be a natural extension of what you're doing. I think it's very, very good and very exciting what you're doing.
Okay, all right, that's good to hear.
Hi, Doug. Kent Cook from Lingear.
Yeah, hi, Kent.
So the load job file and save job file, is that still going to be available?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. So there's no need to change what you're doing if your method of having a template job file or a jumbo job file or whatever you want to call it works for you, and that's the way that you want to continue to use the system. Those menus will still be there, so you can still load those in.
Yeah, very good, because I have to use groups of tools that interact with my macros.
Well, there will be macro support for the library, so you will be able to, again, it would take a commitment and effort on your part, but you could potentially build up a whole set of automation that's retrieving and using data that's been stored in the KBM library. The beauty of that is that it's in one place, so you could modify a tool, and every one of your automations that pulls that tool out would be affected. But
Hey Doug, Mike Berry.
yeah, hi.
Hey, will we be able to store the library on a network drive, or it doesn't have to be local to wherever the software is installed, right?
That's correct. Yeah, you can place it out on a network. So yeah, there's again there will be some discipline that you'll need to take if you plan to share that across multiple systems. You don't want to have start doing all your work on one and then duplicate your work on another without a different database file. You want to try to put the effort in once and then share that as much as you can.
All right, and then you said there'll be macro support for the whole thing.
Right.
And so will there be a text file or an OEL database format, an open database format, where say you had a bunch of tools, vendors, and everything else stored in one database? Could we export data from that to import into this one?
Patrick, are you online? All right. Actually, we won't be providing any tools, at least not in the 2016 timeframe, to do that. I mean, there has been some discussion about, now there are lots of third-party tooling databases available, and that has raised the issue of trying to get that information into ours. The database is, it is a standard relational database, so there are tools, commercially available tools that allow you to basically open databases and manipulate tables and things like that. But at this point, we wouldn't encourage that, but a power user could potentially do that. So that would be something I'd be interested in, having some further discussion with you to understand, what things you want to bring in and what the format of that might be and how we might be able to help there.
Okay, all right. But basically with macro support, though, we could create a text file and import it that way if we wanted to do this.
Sure, I guess. I mean, you could load everything and generate a text file from that, from the JOF. I mean, that JOF is a text file, so.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a fourth question, I guess. We can, and you might have covered this and I missed it. We can populate this database, this knowledge base, with an existing JOF?
That's correct, right. Yep.
Okay.
And one thing that happens, which I didn't mention, is the KBM library, when you're importing data, it automatically filters out duplicates. So, you know, the parameter ID'd item is a unique item, and so if you create groups that have tool numbers or whatever associated to that item, you can have the tool number be 5 in one group and it could be 10 in another. So under the sheets, it's referencing the same item. So it's kind of nice that you don't get a data explosion from just importing a bunch of different JOFs.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Doug, do your custom tool graphics come in this library then?
The custom tool graphics are still process model files that are out on disk in your folder, but the path, if you have a path that path and file name that are referenced by the item, that is getting stored in the library. So if you retrieve a tool and it has that information, it will exist in your job. So it should pull that right in.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? We're kind of running low on time here, so I should probably move on. And again, like I said, yeah.
Steve Green, Frank Kligman from Bronson and Brett, and we were curious as to the ability to be able to make your own materials if we're working with exotic materials, like a standard process, and we'd be flexible and have multi-materials, like 2 different types of aluminum or something?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. As far as the KBM library is concerned, the materials that you add through this list here, they're basically strings that are related to database items. So, you know, if you wanted to call that 6061 T6 and have a different type of aluminum for some other job that you do, you can do that, and it's just going to relate the specific one that you choose at the time that you bring those items into the database. So those items, you would see whatever materials you add, you will see over here, and you can choose that. So the whole idea of storing step information into the KBM library is you're kind of taking experience-based information and putting it in there, as opposed to just looking up in the book and adding it to your material file for calculating speeds and feeds. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I need to kind of move on. Like I said at the beginning, I definitely welcome further discussion with any of you offline at another time. We could do it by email, phone, or one-on-one meetings to kind of explore how this might impact your particular work environment. Okay, so going back to the next thing that we're planning on showing is the model view hierarchical list, and let me just see here. So I guess the goal there was to provide a richer context for you when developing your process model. Currently, we're all familiar with the list view, and it's flat list of elements that doesn't really help you to understand what those elements represent or how they're organized. So we've introduced this new list that allows you to view the data in different ways. Before I get into that, I guess let me go to the product here. start over. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you folks while I get into describing this. Okay, so just to discuss some of the issues with the current list view that we all know and love. It's sometimes showing us elements. It changes to work planes. It changes to layers. It changes to steps. So it's kind of constantly changing, and for a new user in particular, it might not be clear, hey, now this thing's displaying layers. How do I even get it to go back to showing me elements? Some of the more seasoned users would know, well, you just have to click on a panel or click on the group item or something to get it to switch back to that. So that's kind of a little bit of an issue. And then the other thing is just that we have things in the system that we understand what they are, but it's not easy to identify them in the list. So let me just pull in some steps here. I'll just go here, say step groups, turn that off. Let's see, family of parts. Okay, so now I've got some steps in my list here, and let's say I just want to use that step 10, and I'll create a quick profile here, create another one, and then I'll just switch to step 20, create another profile. Whoops. And then if I switch back to step 10, create another one, and go back to 20. So when we look at the element list there, we don't really get a whole lot of feedback of what we have there. We all know that we can select a profile by double clicking, so we understand that those first two elements are a profile and the second two elements are a profile. We understand the same in the step 20. But we see that there's two chunks of blue elements here. We're not really sure whether they're the same step or not. They could be different steps. Same is true for the green elements there. So there's not a whole lot to go on unless you start drilling down and using element data and querying the data to understand what we have. So with that said, I guess what I'm going to do is turn on the new process model view. And so now I'm going to just get rid of the list view. So now you can see we have this tree view here, and there are different view types that are available to me. The current one is a sequenced view that displays layers and steps. So when I expand that out, right away in that list view, it didn't show us anything about whether the first and second blue groups were the same step or not. You can see right here that clearly they are. Same for the step 20, two instances of that. If I drill down further, I can see, oh, I've got two profiles. Same is true in step 20. And I can drill down even further and see the elements that are underneath them. So again, it just gives you so much more information about what you're looking at than what was available in the list view. And there, of course, one of the problems with the element list was you could say I want to insert with step, and I want to insert after steps. And what does it mean to insert after a step that isn't in your job? It's kind of a funny thing. So now, because this list is showing you what's in your job and it's identifying it as a step, you know exactly what steps are in your job, and you can kind of anticipate what the result is going to be. Let me just look here. So again, you see what we've done with profiles. We've added a new enhancement that kind of mimics that for holes, and we've called that a hole sequence. So let me just choose a drill here, and I'll just create some hole elements. And right now my properties are, my level is at 0, and I'll just create some holes that are at 1 inch deep. And now I'll change my level to -1 and maybe set my clearance to -0.9. And I'll create some additional holes. And again, when I open up this list here, it recognizes that this isn't just one set of holes, because they really have different properties, and they're going to be handled by a different CAM cycle that's going to output them. So you're seeing the whole sequence heading in the list here. And again, I can expand that out and see the elements that are within it. Okay, so I guess moving on, I'm going to just load a model here and show you how that plays out in some things with more information in them. Okay, so here I've got a model where I've just taken a part that I programmed in one orientation, and I've made a copy of it and all the related toolpath and placed it in another orientation. And so currently I'm looking at this layer step view. I can expand that out, and you can see all the layer information, all the steps. You can see that it appears that I'm doing all the tools on one part and then doing all the same tools on the other part. Just to give you a glimpse of another view, we have a layer tool view, which is basically a sequential view the same way as the layer step view was, but instead of showing the step as the highest element, it shows the tool. So you can clearly see that you have the same tool being used in a non-sequential way. And when I expand that out, then you can see the step that uses it. So it's just a slightly different flavor of the step view. But just to go further, in this case here, I've got G54 and G55 work coordinate offsets associated with these different work planes. And so we have a work plane view, and when I do that, it kind of collapses everything. And again, that gives me a real clear indication of how this model is organized. And if I was doing this in a multiple setup, I more than likely would want to just run all my toolpath with tool 1, then move to tool 2 and continue on. So let me go ahead and do a step sort here. If I go into step sort and sort all my steps, you can now see the impact that has to my job. So under each one of these headings, you can see I'm doing each toolpath. And now you might think, well, that's kind of a bit overwhelming trying to make sense of all that. So we have another view that's more conducive to that, and it's a layer step work plane view. So again, it's very similar to the layer step view, the difference being that I can now expand out each item, and I can verify that it's doing the work on each part and each coordinate offset. And again, you can expand out what's under each of these. Okay. One thing I didn't talk about is a longer term goal, which we're not going to get there in this time frame, is to be able to start allowing you to look into containers and edit the content of a container without having to unpack it and to reference into it for specifying an element. You'll note here I've expanded out this pocketing container, and you can see the elements that are within it are identified with sort of an outline numbering scheme. And currently there's nothing you can really do to these elements. It's just sort of visual information. But in the future you could envision where you might select one and modify it or delete it or reference it by some other panel that you want to perform an operation on. Okay, so I'm pretty much done with that. Just to give you a few other flavors of models, let me just show you another one where I have a tombstone fixture, and again, you can see it's kind of daunting to try to get your arms around what this model is currently organized as. As soon as I do the work plane view, you can easily see how it's set up, and this one happens to be set up to minimize indexes, and it's running through all the tools on one face before indexing to the next. And again, like the previous example, I could sort all those tools and then view it with the other view, and I'd be looking at a much more condensed picture. So people that do this type of work, I think, are going to really find these new model views helpful. Okay, so with that, let me just quickly kind of summarize what we saw today. In the case of the material library, in the case of the KBM database, we are now providing the ability to store steps and tools into the database. You can associate those tools and steps with materials and machines. You can store groups of tools or groups of steps with their assignment numbers for a variety of purposes. It could be for templates, it could be for tool catalogs, it could be for machine setups, it could be for groups of steps to machine features. We've showed you that you can filter when selecting those items based on material and machine and group and type. We've showed you that you could sort the list by clicking on a heading, so you could sort all the tools in diameter order, ascending order. And we've shown you that you can now load single items from the library or multiple items. To summarize the model view functionality, just that it allows you to easily distinguish what you have in your model and how you have your model organized. It shows you multiple instances of steps and layers. It shows you profiles and whole sequences, and it allows you to dive into the process containers and see what kinds of elements or profiles happen to be inside of those. So with that, I'm gonna unmute you guys and open it up for questions. Okay.
Gary Mark Suiza here. I think this is very, very, very exciting. This is going to make our job a lot easier. This is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to working with that.
Oh, that's good to hear. Do you think those work plane views are something that that you would be using?
I would be using that probably 10 times a day. That in conjunction with, we talked previously about containers when you copy them to different planes, but I think it's going to help. It's going to make things much clearer. I think it's extremely helpful, and I think it's just, I'm totally excited about this. It's going to be such a performance enhancement. I almost venture to say that we can get twice as much work done with this than we currently able to.
Oh, okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or input?
Doug, Mike DeBerry again.
Yeah.
You can have named elements underneath.
Sure. Yeah, it still supports the named elements, so you can name any of the elements, and when it rolls them up under a profile, if you expand out the profile, you'll see the names.
All right. And then my second question was, you had the original history tree opened before. You can
Right.
show both of them.
Um,
If you click, okay, yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Now, if you click on an element in the original history tree, would it go to the tree on the right side?
Currently not. This is an area that we're working on. The current thought is that we're going to put this view under here, and you can see we have one called the super awesome dynamic list. So that has not yet been worked out, but currently it's just showing an element list here. So we envision that this list here is going to go away and be rolled into this other view.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to touch on that. I think that's a really good question because we're all used to the other view. I could see the benefit if you can drag that list to another monitor, and right now, without thinking more about it, but I think I would like to see both of them. That would be helpful.
Okay. One thing I forgot to ask about or to talk about, I'm just curious, in version 2015 we introduced this concept of being able to pick items locally. Are people making use of that, or are they still by habit picking them out of the list view area?
Gary Mark Souza here again. I'm making use of it, but I find the display list too small.
Okay, yeah, that's one of the things that we kind of thought was that with some further enhancement to those local picking lists, it would almost, eliminate the need to be displaying these in this other list, because you could imagine that maybe there's an option to pin this open. So in the case of, one of the cases that I kind of came across was mask is one where if I'm masking steps, it's convenient to be able to just walk through a list like this and toggle them on and off. And the current doing it one by one is kind of awkward. So you could imagine that there's maybe an option to pin the list open while you make your selections and then close it. So we're thinking about those kinds of things. And I think if we get that refined good enough that you'll find that you won't really even need this list.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Julian Arsene, King Machine. I got a question about the use that you have on the feature tree that shows up on the right side.
Right.
Is there any functionality in mind where you'd be able to customize the granularity that you're showing? So I guess what I'm getting at, you set up these scenarios where you have step layer work plane.
Right.
That defines the granularity by which you create the hierarchy where you're sorting the elements in the list. Is there any idea if there's going to be a functionality where you can, for example, drag elements out of a list and sort them in a specific way up top that would customize the granularity inside the feature tree?
Right now the granularity is kind of fixed based on the chosen view. You did touch on dragging and dropping. I mean, one of the areas that we are planning to explore is you could imagine how once you see information in this form, it'd be nice to just be able to grab this tool and slide it on up to here. So those are definitely things that we're going to be looking at. As far as I guess, so what you're asking, being able to say, I don't want to see the top level items, the layer and step, and I only want to see from profile down or something, or level of...
I guess what I was envisioning was, instead of the use drop-down box that you had at the top, was a bench area where you would have elements that you'd be able to use as granular categories, which would be step, layer, work plane, named element group, or anything like that, like an icon bar. And then below it would be the actual use area where you would drag the element from the bench over, and then the order in which you drag them in and would create the granularity of your feature tree model.
Yeah, we haven't explored any concepts like that. I guess that's this is Mike that I'm talking to, right?
Julian, that's another programmer that works with
okay.
me.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean that's something we can talk about offline. You know, I think it'd be a little hard for me to fully comprehend what you're saying here, but I would definitely be interested in you know, hearing more about that.
And then one more question. Is there any way that we can customize the names of the features that show up in the feature tree? For example, if we were to be able to use the description of steps, description of tools, instead of the numbers, is there any possibility to do that?
So which items are you talking about? So like the profile item that you see here is sort of a system-generated header.
If I get a model from one of the other programmers that we work with, or I start building a model from one of the documents provided by my customer, layer 4 can mean one thing in one scenario, and layer 10 can mean the same thing in a different scenario. So numbers usually don't have as much meaning as, for example, with a base geometry, an imported geometry.
That's a neat one. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. So is there any potential, for example, to dropping the layer number to customize the header of the feature tree?
We haven't discussed that, but it might potentially be possible. I mean, I guess we'll have to explore that.
I got a quick question, Doug. This is Mike again.
Yeah.
When you did the drilled holes in your example,
Mm-hmm.
when you had them at different levels, that's how it sorted them. Let's say if you're using a spot drill, you might have that at different levels, but only want it to be one sequence of events.
Right.
Yeah, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think that's more of a how it's output in code, I guess.
Right.
We do have some work that we would like to do in code to better support the retract to clear versus retract to check distance behavior. So I think that really depends on how the code generator is configured. I mean, currently, you know, code just looks at, you know, is the next hole the same as the previous hole, and if it is, then it kind of considers it to be of the same scan cycle call. So so we haven't done anything in that area to better support that, I guess, is the answer. So this is all just sort of...
Same way.
I'm sorry?
So like if those 8 holes you had on it that were at different levels, if I were to optimize them, and I wouldn't want them to do all the 4 holes at one level, then the next 4 holes at another level. I want them to do the closest XY.
Mm.
So when you optimize, is it going to change your structure on the right there?
Yeah, it would, yes.
Okay. It's fine, I'm just...
So yeah, I mean, I guess what you have to keep in mind is these roll-up headings that you're seeing are system generated. They're not like real objects in the database. You know, we understand that these arc line arc elements represent a contiguous profile, so therefore we build this heading and display it in the list. So as soon as you change the database around, the order or whatever, it's going to automatically generate new headings that reflect the current state.
What happens if you right-click on all of those on the 259?
On this
On
heading?
the 559, not yet. Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I mean,
That answered my question.
there's behaviors defined for, you know, like if you click on a profile and you say insert after, we understand that you want to insert after the profile, so we set it to be after the last element in the profile. So all of these things sort of, you know, there's defined behavior for them. Anybody else have anything?
I have one question which is related to the model that you're showing on screen. I'm struggling a little bit with sorting on tombstone kind of work or rotary type of work with tooling. Is there any work plans to work on that in the future?
Well, we've discussed it, and it is a backlog item in our list. It's just it's not currently resourced or scheduled for release. So it's it falls into the category of, yeah, we know it would be good to have some improved optimization for rotary axis, but we just haven't gotten to that yet. And
well, I think what you got there, what you're working on, is very, very exciting, and I say it's more important than the other thing. It's just it's on my top priority list as well. So that's what I'm asking.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I guess we should probably wrap this up. And again, I really appreciate you folks taking the time to sit in on this, and I would definitely welcome further discussion, and you can initiate it with email, and or give me a call or whatever, and we can discuss it further. So.
Okay. I would like to say thank you for doing that. I think you did a wonderful job, and it's really, really exciting. I think it's a good way to excite your loyal user base for the future, and to continue to support you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you, everyone.